Hey, you're listening to Abyss Gazing, a horror podcast where we celebrate all things spooky and mental health.
I'm your co-host, Mark.
And I'm Billy.
And I'm your other co-host, not Johnny Bartlett. What's going on? I mean, I've passed away. I've gone to the other side, but I'm stuck here in this realm.
Still causing trouble.
Still causing trouble, still wreaking havoc. Anyway, we are joined by cosplayer Smash. What's going on, friend?
Hey, how are you guys?
I'm good. Mark just woke up.
3-day weekends for the win.
Always.
And so welcome back to the Victims and Villains universe. It's been
A year, I
I
think.
think almost about a year, yeah, because you were part of our stream last year. And if you guys didn't get a chance to check out the cosplay and mental health panel we did last year, Smash was a part of it. It was it's on our YouTube. We'll link it in the show notes below for this one. But we have an event together coming up that I want to go ahead and plug for real quick, and that is Cosplay World here in Richmond. So tell us a little bit about the event.
It's my favorite convention of like the whole year. Like, just because it's so unique and different. It's really showcasing and highlighting cosplayers and their artistry. So unlike most shows, this show you get to come up to us, ask us questions about how we're making things. All of our booths have hands-on. We'll either have build books or we'll have the actual props and costumes at our booths. And it's trying to bring together like all your local cosplayers, but then you have international cosplayers as well. Just like our main international cosplayer for this year is Ludus Cosplays. And we've changed the structuring a bit to our convention. So it's going to be a lot more fun and a lot more hands-on and just highlighting, a safe space for everyone.
I really appreciated being a part of what you guys did last year with Victims and Villains. We were able to do outreach last year. We're coming back this year to do outreach, and got to meet incredible people like yourself and J9 Lives, who is also heavily involved with this. And for those that may have never been a part of this convention or may have never even heard of it, it's June 15th and 16th. It's Father's Day weekend. But this is a really interesting cosplay convention, like you said. Like, this is very driven for the cosplayers and those that may be interested in it. How do you guys kind of keep refreshing it from year to year in terms to where it doesn't feel redundant or over just kind of repeating yourself, essentially?
So we kind of make sure to rotate our guests. So this year you will see guests who have been here for the 3 years, and it'll be their last year kind of as a guest before we rotate in newer cosplayers, as well as some cosplayers who have been doing it a long time but haven't necessarily taken on the role as a guest. On top of that, we have now partnered with a convention in Costa Rica. So we actually are main cosplay contest winner for the main best in show, if you will actually get to go to Cosplay World Costa Rica. And we're starting this whole international collaboration with this convention. So keeping it fresh in that turn, what will happen is, their best in show will then come to Cosplay World. So it's kind of an international exchange of cosplayers, if you will.
All right, guys, I'm gonna go prepare my cosplay for this convention. Go get my passports. I'm thinking about going as Johnny Bartlett.
I'm going your suitcase. I'm your carry-on.
That's really awesome. I didn't know about some of that stuff, so it's really
Yeah.
cool to kind of see the growth that you guys have done in such a short period of time. But yeah, tickets are available now that you guys can purchase. We'll provide
Yes.
links for it in the show notes below. But my last question before we jump into take a brief commercial break is going to be for those that may be listening that have been, toying around with the idea of cosplay. What is like the easiest way to kind of step into that world and like kind of like I guess like beginner advice that you would give?
I guess the most I've only been cosplaying for it'll be 3 years this June. So for me, the best advice I was given was either start cosplay with a fandom that you love or start cosplay with a character that no one has asked to see a cosplay of. So do it anyway because it'll normally get a big reaction, a very like just crazy, amazing, overwhelming, supportive reaction of that character. So it may not be a character that's like popular or big in the fandoms, but it's really just pick someone that makes your heart happy and roll with it.
See, you're just confirming that I need to be
Johnny Bartlett.
Johnny Bartlett for this convention.
I guess I'll have to go with Frank.
All right. Well, Cosplay World is going to be June 15th and 16th this year, 2024, at Richmond Greater Convention Center. We'll provide more links and tickets and all that other stuff will be in the show notes below. We're going to take a quick commercial break, but what you guys are getting ready to hear right now is an unreleased track from Lila Moons. We did an interview with her over on YouTube. You guys can check out that. If you guys like what you hear, come check her out alongside Safe Sex, Betty Gray, Saint of Pine Hills, and Ooga Booga. June 22nd at Garden Grove Brewing. This is our next outreach show that we're doing. Go to victimsandvillains.net/events or facebook.com/victimsandvents for more information. This is Riches by Lila Moons. This is unreleased. This is an exclusive for you guys. We'll be right back.
I've been wearing your chain around my neck, the one you gave me the other day. Said not to give it back 'cause I'm yours, and I can have anything you got because it doesn't matter anyhow. You said it's useless to dreams. We're living one already. It's not as you think it seems. The world is ours. It's all we have. So let's live in it together and remember it when we're You said not to worry about the future. You said you got it secured. You know that I would never hurt you, but that security only comes with time. And you know time is money, and me
If you or someone you know is listening to this podcast right now and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. This is the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net/hope. That resource is going to be right in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this. There you'll find resources that include the National Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HELP to 741-741. We also have a plethora of other resources, including churches, getting connected with counselors, LGBT resources like the Trevor Project, and also veteran hotline as well. Please, if you hear nothing else in the show, understand that you listening to this right now, have value and worth. We get it. Suicide, depression, mental health, these are hard topics, and the stigma around them doesn't make it any easier. But please consider the resources right in the descriptions below, wherever you guys are listening, because once again, you have value and you have worth. So please stay with us. Welcome back to Abyss Gazing, where we're jumping into the weird, surprisingly deep world of Peter Jackson's The Frighteners. Billy picked this one. I think this is the first time that Billy has been a co-host and has actually picked a movie, so I'm excited.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I think it's come up in conversation a couple times over the years, but we never went with it.
Yeah,
It's just
kind of
because
like
we
one of my.
didn't.
It's one of my guilty pleasure movies. I've always liked this movie. You know, I liked Michael J. Fox, of course, because of Family Ties and because of Back to the Future and other movies. And of course, my mom used to like Secret of My Success and all that stuff. But this one, when he finally hit the horror, it kind of, you know, that's my thing. I like horror growing up with all the horror stuff. So that's why I picked this one. Michael J. Fox was one of my actors I liked.
It's also a really... Go ahead, Mark.
Wasn't it one of Michael J. Fox's last movies before he finally retired?
I think this was one of his last big screen movies, but I know like shortly afterwards he went on to go do Spin City, and he did television for quite a while before ultimately retiring.
And also, this is one of the last movies before he announced his Parkinson's. He got the Parkinson's in 91 is when he was diagnosed, but didn't tell everybody till 98, I think it was, and this one came out in 96.
Yeah. Also, this is a really fascinating like spot in Peter Jackson's filmography as well, because it still has a lot of like the weird and zaniness that like some of his movies like Bad Taste and Meet the Feebles had, but then it has like that traditional Hollywood feel that he would become to be known for in like, you know, Lord of the Rings, Lovely Bones, stuff like that. You know, once he kind of stepped into more, I hesitate to use the word prestigious, but like comparing Lord of the Rings to The Frighteners, definitely there feels like there's like night and day difference.
Well, I believe it was also a theatrical flop that really didn't start making money till it hit video. Yeah. And then it kind of got almost a cult following.
That's what I was going to say. It pretty much got a cult following after a while. After it was out, it was more found not found footage, but you know, people found the movie after the theaters because it was more visible, and most people didn't go to theaters for it at that time.
Well, not only that though, it was hitting the box office at the same time as Independence Day, so it was competing with a huge movie.
Oh, fascinating! I didn't
know that.
But also, this is such a weird. I feel like every once in a while we come across a movie in this podcast where I don't quite know how you would market it, and this feels like definitely one of those movies that's like hard to market. Like for an example, like I guess totally out of the realm. But if you guys have seen the movie Drive-Away Dolls, you know that the trailer for it doesn't really do it justice, because it looks like a road trip movie, and it's like this like really weird like coming of age like love story that has to do with like dildos and politicians. It's so weird. My wife and I just rewatched it this past Friday. It's a very weird movie, but you can't market stuff like that. So it's becomes one of these movies that it's really you know, hard to market. And I feel like that's probably what the case was here, because this movie on the surface is like, oh, this guy's found some way to communicate with the dead. Now he uses it to like make a living. Like that in a nutshell is kind of what it is. But then you get into this and it's like, it's about this movie that's about loss and grief and, you know, the grieving process and kind of like how it can lead you astray sometimes, but also at the same time, like it's about like toxic relationships and like it's like a multi-layered kind of story that I feel like only Peter Jackson could tell.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about loss and grief. I'll go ahead and start it with this so we can go to the happier stuff. The loss and grief part, it hit different because, you know, I haven't watched this movie in a while. I've watched it years ago, but not since everything happened where my wife passed away and everything. So that it hit different now that I could see Frank's side of it, where what happened and the guilt and almost like, did I do that, or what could have been done different, or how can I get over this, or, you know, I'm not good enough to keep going, or stuff like that. It kind of the feelings it felt like he was going through the movie, if you're watching it. And I'm going to be honest, I went through those feelings and they hit hard. And it didn't really hit me like hard to where I was like, you know, depressed or anything, but hard as in, God, I could see that now. That was me before Mark tried to pull me out of it. And it's just different now to see the movie in that aspect.
Survivor's guilt is a very real thing that in the grieving process, I don't think we talk about nearly enough. Because, you know, part of Frank's journey throughout the course of this film is this idea of, you know, trying to essentially bury himself in work and this world that he's kind of found himself in. And he's also at the same time, like, taken the guilty verdict for like his wife's passing. And so like, he's got this like mountains of debt, of not debt, regret and remorse from, you know, being that survivor. And that, so that this film, I think, explores like very real, and also the, you know, some of the challenges of like trying to actually get back to life following the death of a spouse, you know, where it's kind of predictable where he ends up with, man, why am I blanking on the chick's name? I just watched it.
Lucy.
Lucy. Yeah, the
Lucy,
fact
yeah.
that he ends up with like Lucy, it's kind of predictable, but also at the same time, you're watching both of them kind of go through this grieving process together and finding a love at the end of it.
Well, and that's honestly a thing that, you know, is part of those steps of grief. You kind of, when you lose someone, you do latch on to, it is very common for people to latch on to someone who's shown you kindness.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, you know, right from the get-go, we already know the fact that Frank ends up at Lucy's house even before, what was his name? Ray.
Yeah.
Even before Ray gets everything to his heart stolen. You know, that's a common, like, everyday world problem of, you'll have someone who's just lost someone. You'll have someone else stepping in to provide kindness, and the person who's grieving mistakes it as loving relationship with them, and then it either develops or it can go horribly, horribly wrong.
Yeah, and I mean, this being like a Hollywood movie, they're like, oh, we're gonna tell the happy love story kind of thing, where, you know,
Yeah.
you get that like that hillside picnic at the end with them. But I guess like Billy, like you having recently been through this, did you find yourself like in an emotionally like compromised state throughout the course of like the grieving period?
Yeah, I mean, the latching on is a very, very true, real thing. Even not for just love, like as a significant other, but love as a, like friendship and everything
Mhm.
like that. When you shut down and all, there are some times where you just try to latch on to only certain people and not deal with the rest of the world. Mark, um,
What?
I tried to latch on to you, man. After you started being like, hey, you should come over, watch the fights and everything. So that's why it became like an every weekend thing, or me hanging out with you. I've never told you that before, but that's the truth.
Well, somebody
Uh,
had to get you out of the house.
yeah, but what I'm saying is comparing it to what they're asking, that's what that is. We were already friends years before that, but that was what that was. It was, I already knew that friendship. But if you're going at the love side of it, there were there could have been some. I didn't look for it or anything because I didn't want that. But there is the idea and opportunity of, if you're hanging out, or hanging out with your female friends or whatever, or if you're a female, your male friends, to where they're showing the kindness and everything, you can misread things very easily when you're in that state. If you're in that depressed, or nobody loves me, or nobody cares, or whatever, it's very easy to find that one person, like she said, that shows you that kindness, and you misread it for more than that.
I think on the flip side of that, it's really easy also to find something to escape into. And I think that's kind of the other side that we see of Frank in this, is that he's kind of really shut off from the rest of the world
Mhm.
to an extent, to where his friends are now dead people, right? Like he's able to kind of coerce with the other side, and that's kind of the flip side of what we end up seeing with him, and kind of like him having to like you know the process of like allowing yourself to, like, you've built up this wall, you've built up this like barricade from like other human beings, and now you're having to trickle it down to allow people to be in. You're basically allowing yourself to say, I'm, to quote Michael Scott, I'm ready to be heard again, you know,
Yeah.
and kind of, take that chance. And that's kind of what I feel like another part of his arc throughout the course of the movie is that, like, he has to find a way to, learn to feel again, because he does feel very shut off, very isolated, to where like he's practically homeless. He's you see it kind of throughout the movie where like he's in this, like, he's working on his house, but you never really see how bare bones the house is until the end of the movie, when it like finally comes crashing down.
or any progress. It's
Yeah.
He's working on it, but he's always working on it. And the fact
Well,
that he was friends with basically just the ghosts versus like humans, it was a defense mechanism, most likely, to where they can't hurt him, where if he lets somebody else entrust the human, it's very real, and they can hurt him again.
well, he was. A lot of the town thought he had murdered his wife,
Mm-hmm.
so everybody was staying away from him. It wasn't a case of not getting close to people or having friends or anything, or new relationships. It was that the town thought he murdered his wife and got away with it. And he just kind of stopped working on the house. They showed him walking through the house fairly early in the movie,
Yeah.
and it was just empty and framework. So they never really showed like even where he slept or anything, and just a skeleton of a house.
I'm glad they hit on one of the guilt things, though, in the story. It talked about the basketball court, the how he was working on that, and that was important to him, and then the car accident with his wife. And it shows towards the end that he went back and did the flowers, and basically the basketball court's there, but it's like not there. It's just the hoop and everything, and they have the flowers all over the backyard, showing that that was part of his guilt also, in trying to make amends to his wife, because that's what she wanted.
See, that was kind of the turning point for me in the movie of you. It's like that glimmer of hope because there's so much subtext in this movie that if you're really paying attention frame by frame and like to dialogue, that is the moment in which I was like, yeah, no, he definitely didn't kill his wife. There's no way. Because at that time, we really don't know who's killed Deborah quite yet. But you hear about the argument. They're saying that's why he killed her. And then you see just the hoop standing there, but an entire garden. That was my like, yeah, no, he didn't do this. This wasn't him. So like you mentioned, that particular aspect of the house. And I think that's the moment where, because we're going through all the emotions with the characters, that's the moment where I know I at least felt hope for the future for Frank.
Yeah. Yeah, Frank definitely, like, I mean, you throughout his like journey, like you can definitely tell that, I mean, even when I think another great scene to kind of showcase the character traits you're kind of talking about, Smash, is the scene in the bathroom, like where he goes in and like he's like watching and he's like, man, like I just witnessed this, like, I've also the scene where he's talking with Dammers in the interrogation room and like he's like, oh, you have like all of these unexplained, I think it was like 28 or like 30 like unexplained like murders that had been like tied to him over the years, and like trying to get to like the end of that is like, no, like he's not just trying to do it to like clear his name, but like also at the same time like he's trying to like better understand a lot of that process of how either how he ended up in the situation in the first place, but also to kind of find closure for his wife, and also at the same time like he's a stand-up guy. He just happens to be troubled with this curse.
And I think the jail scene where he was actually in the jail cell was one of the turning points also, because that was his isolation, kind of. He isolated himself from the world completely, everybody, until Lucy came in and started talking to him and all. And you could really see that he started feeling, because they showed the tear coming from his face. So that's when he kind of opened up and said, okay, it seemed like he opened up and said, okay, maybe I'll give this a chance.
Well, he went to jail kind of to protect her to begin with, because he thought everybody was dying around him. So that's why he went to jail. And then I kind of saw it more of, was that before the flashback where what was it? I'm trying to remember when it was when they showed the accident. But I kind of think he was remembering his wife more than anything else.
And I think it might have been before the flashback, because the flashback, he's got Dahmer's in the car. I think he's got Lucy in the car too, and he's pulling Lucy out. So I think it was before. I don't know.
It started it. It didn't really show Johnny Bartlett or I can't think of the other girl's name. Patricia. It didn't show them, but it showed the accident itself. So it started the accident because that's after he went down the hill with the lady, the one that screamed at him. I can't remember her name either. I know the character.
Oh, the newspaper lady.
Yeah. So that's where
she
she died, and she was laying on the ground, and it started the flashback of seeing her and it flashing to his wife. It didn't really go into the details of everything, but that's where the flashback started, where they started feeding them in slowly.
There were a lot of flashbacks.
Yes.
But I mean,
I like how they did that.
Yeah,
they didn't give you everything right at the beginning. It was a flashback, and you're like, okay, yeah, I could see why everybody says this. And then the next one's like, okay, well, what is he really seeing? And then the other one's like, oh, that makes so much more sense now of why all this is happening. And he just suppressed like everything that he saw.
Yeah.
What got me is you had all these semi-grounded, because it's kind of a crazy movie, grounded characters, and then you had the FBI guy come out, just show up and is completely
Oh.
batshit crazy.
with the full
And
metal jacket.
yeah. How did y'all feel about him?
Let me just say that let me just shout out Jeffrey Combs because that man, this film has like a weird pedigree of like horror icons because Dee Wallace is also in this movie, and like she's almost unrecognizable because like the majority of things that she's like got like the short blonde hair, and she's got, you know, she's very perky, she's very malevolent in this one. But to answer your question, particularly about Dammers, what a fascinating character, because he's so weird to begin with. The way that they kind of like introduce him, like he won't make eye contact with Lucy when she's like in the interrogation, and then like during the interrogation scene between him and Frank, he like rips off his shirt. He's got like the breastplate on, and then he gets weirder and weirder from there. And I was like, man, this his character arc throughout the course of this was kind of what I was talking about earlier, where it's like when you look at Peter Jackson's like filmography with like, you know, a lot of his earlier films, so you're talking about Bad Taste, Brain Dead, you know, Meet the Feebles, there's just the weirdness to it, and he is like the representation of like early Peter Jackson, in my opinion.
Yeah,
I feel like they had an opportunity with him to do a spin-off movie of his early career.
yeah.
and the weird junk that he had been through.
I mean, one of my favorite lines from him was when they were in the interrogation room with the sheriff and Frank, and he pulls out his badge. He's like, "By the president of the United States, I have the right to get out of this room." And I'm like, oh my God, that's just hilarious to me, because I've seen so many of the other types. Hey, look, I'm FBI, get out of the room or whatever. But this one took it a step a little bit further with the comedic, by the president and everything. Just like that line.
It's funny because I always know him from Reanimator and a couple roles he played in Star Trek. Those are the two things I know him from. And I see him in other stuff, and he just plays these like weird little quirky roles. And this might be the most crazy of them all.
Well, and I think that's kind of the point of the movie, is he's kind of in there to provide that little comedic relief moment where we're all just kind of like, what is happening? Why are you here? And you know, you mentioned having the full breastplate under. That's just the first time he takes off his shirt. Then he does it again in the graveyard, and you're seeing all the tattoos, and I'm just like, this cannot be real. He like, and it's almost like it's going back to that subtext, because you're like, okay, what is wrong with this guy? And then you're like, and then you see all the tattoos, and I'm like sitting there looking at each individual one, and I'm going, oh no, everything matches up. His whole character matches up just with those little moments. But it was one of those, when he was introduced, I'm like, just why? Why is this happening?
And like, I have a love-hate relationship with characters like Dammers that are introduced so late into the movie, because they're either going to be really great and they're going to add something to like another layer to the movie, which, you know, happens with Dammers. He's a fascinating character, or it's going to completely take away from every other character journey. But they found a really smart way to throw him into the mix and like never take away from the story they were already telling. How would you guys like to help us get mental health resources into schools, conventions, and other events? Well, now you can. Simply go to patreon.com/victims and villains for as little as $1 a month. You guys can help us get mental health resources into current and upcoming generations, educate and break down stigma surrounding mental health, suicide, and depression. And you get exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. And you guys can tell us which Nicolas Cage movie you want us to cover, and we'll do it. All it takes to get started is to go to patreon.com/victims and villains, or simply click the link in the episode description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode. Pick your tier and get started today. Yes, it's that simple. So quickly select the tier that you want and help us get hope into the hands of the depressed and the suicidal today.
Yeah.
And why did he have all of his scars like pentagrams and look like people took meat out of him? I would have liked to have known about that too.
He was part of a cult or something. I don't know.
Yeah, that's the great thing about this about that second scene where he takes off his shirt is like you're just like, I don't know what's happening, but yeah, let's just
I'm
go
here
for
it.
I don't know. I think maybe the pentagram was like just an illusion to the whole like, you know, Frank is moving people into the light, but at the same time, you know, once we realize Johnny Bartlett's back, Patricia's involved with Johnny Bartlett yet again, or I guess she never really stopped being involved with him. But that, I think with the pentagram for me, that was like, I was like, okay, this is going to be, we're doing good versus evil. This is a very like Nietzsche ready to go type situation. And, you know, I know it's just like, it seems so silly because it's just something put on his body, but it's one of those like, oh, this is the bigger picture, deeper meaning moments.
That scene in particular that you're talking about does like shift, and because there are the great thing about the storytelling with the Frighteners is that there are multiple stories going on, and that's kind of the moment where it pivots and every little subplot all connects together in a really great way.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons why I liked this movie was because of, towards the beginning and everything before that scene where it's revealed that it's Johnny Bartlett, that it was like a Grim Reaper kind of feel to it. And, I always liked the Grim Reaper, all kinds of stuff, Billy and Mandy, all that stuff. So
that was a cool design
yeah,
for a Grim Reaper in a movie.
yeah. So, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I always loved this movie was that Grim Reaper feel to it. And then, like you're saying, at that scene, that's where it's revealed it's Johnny Bartlett. That's where it's kind of like everything ties together at that scene and moves on from there. And it seems like one cohesive story versus all the sub stories coming together to make into that cohesive story, which it worked out great with this one. I've seen that blow up in other movies to where all those sub stories never really meshed to make sense. This one actually did.
Johnny Bartlett's also a really fascinating character to watch in a post-Facebook world where we are constantly comparing ourselves to other people, or we are creating envy because, so and so is currently on the beach of, Bahamas or whatever. When you look at Johnny Bartlett's, when they finally flesh him out in the flashbacks, like he's not satisfied with being compared to somebody else. He always wants to be better and always wants to outdo them. So like there's a scene where like he turns to Patricia and says, oh, this is going to be number 11. And then, when he has this like scene where like Lucy goes to rescue Patricia before it's revealed that like she's in on it, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
He like turns to her and he's like, yeah, she would be like number 41 or 42. And then he drops another name that he would be outdoing. So I just thought that was like such a fascinating thing to like look for. I've seen bits and pieces of this movie over the years, but this was like the first time I've sat down and watched it from start to finish. And
never seen it?
I had never seen it all the way through. I'd seen bits and pieces of it, but I really liked this movie, and but also at the same time, like I thought that was like a really interesting aspect to kind of walk away from, especially when you're talking about mental health as well.
Yeah, I picked a movie Josh didn't see the full thing of.
I had never seen it either. I actually,
great.
when Josh texted me, I was like the band? Are we talking about Frighteners, the band or the movie? That's how bad it was. And he's like, the movie?
I didn't even know there was a band.
There is a band. And then I ended up watching it probably like 4 or 5 times since Friday.
Nice.
And then it's also my photography friend's one of his favorite movie, Bryant Cox.
Yeah.
So he was like, he was like, we're going to talk about this and we're going to talk about this. And did you understand this part? And do you know why they did this? And so like having someone who saw it in the movie theater and he remembers going to see it, I think that helps me because I'm so much younger that I was like, well, this is just a ripoff of this movie. And he's like, you do realize your movie came well after this movie. And so then it gave me this like, oh my gosh, all my movies are a lie. Like it's all taken from the Frighteners. So it was a nostalgic moment for me to have like what I grew up on, which were those Disney comedic horror movies that they made just for TV. And then to have this and be like, oh, everything makes sense now.
I remember it coming out, but I don't remember if it was one that I actually went and saw in the theater. I do remember I may have got it on VHS and watched it a bunch when it came out. And because back then it usually was a year to 2 years between the release of the movie in the theater and the time it came out on video. That was like, I guess, some sort of contract or something that they had in place. It took up to 2 years to get a movie on video. The Crow, I think, took longer than that.
It took the way that they would process films from theatrical release to home video actually just took longer. That's the reason why like the technology just wasn't the way that it is today. Is like most times, like most theaters, like they don't get like the reels. Like you get like a Blu-ray version of it or like something that's like Blu-ray adjacent, and then you essentially pop it in to the projector type, like a Blu-ray essentially.
While we're on the subject of technology, can we just talk about that? Like with the movie, the ghosts, man, they still hold up today. Like I'm not even gonna lie. The special effects for the ghosts are so good. And then you have the Grim Reaper. I am not a fan of how they did the Grim Reaper. And I was reading how Peter Jackson had originally wanted to do it, and they wanted to have a puppet that they moved through a fish tank to get that. And I'm like, why didn't you just do that? It would have looked so much better because you have these ghosts that just stand up and hold up.
Yeah.
You know, we're almost 30 years later now. And they still are holding up to today. I mean, I still think they're just as good as any of the ghosts in the new Ghostbusters movies. But then you just have the Reaper and then the tentacles from hell. Like those two just didn't match up special effect wise. So I have to wonder, like, was it because there was already the technology to make the apparitions just look so good, and then they were trying to venture in to the more CGI feel of everything else?
So this is
it wasn't that far later that he did Lord of the Rings. That was like his immediate next project. And I think he used the same tech to do the ghosts in that too.
No. So the technology in Lord of the Rings, and I know this because my wife's a super fan. Lord of the Rings just broke ground on mocap. So a lot of the special effects you're seeing in that, if not all of them, are motion capture. And I think when you look at like, I'm really fascinated by like CGI around this time. This is a year after Toy Story. When you go back and you watch Toy Story by today's standards is really, really hard to watch from a visual standpoint. It's very blocky. It feels like a very early PlayStation 1 kind of video games. And I think the reason that a lot of the ghosts hold up is because, this is my guess, is that they found a process to where they would probably put them in makeup and then, you know, do some sort of like light saturation or, you know, somewhere to where it's like it's relying more on the actors than it is on the visuals. And that's the reason why they look so good. But you get outside the ghosts and it looks, it's noticeably aged. Right. So like the Grim Reapers, like that, the scene where like it's revealed that like Johnny Bartlett's still alive and he's got that like weird ooze like face looking thing. Like I was like, this looks really cool in theory, but it doesn't look like it aged really well. And also
Yeah.
like the tentacles from hell, also that you mentioned, like
Oh my gosh.
it's visually
Yeah, it's like
kind of messed up.
that looked like it was recycled from the hell scenes of Spawn, or Spawn used it from that, one or the other.
Spawn came out a year later, so probably.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I mean the way they did Johnny Bartlett with the carpet and everything before they revealed the Grim Reaper thing and the mirror thing. Now for the time that was that was decent. That was good. Look at Toy Story. Everybody at the time was this is one of the best animations
Yeah.
and everything else. So for the time and what they had is these were like great special effects, but for us to compare it now, it's like look where we started, look where we are.
It's also again, I go back to like where this takes place in Peter Jackson's filmography, because when you look at like Meet the Feebles, Bad Taste, Brain Dead, a lot of those movies are very practical effects heavy, and so I gotta imagine it's a studio decision, because if what you're saying, Smash, is that they were interested in using like puppets and like going the practical effects, I think it would have held up way better going that way than they went to the digital. They're like, no, wait, this stuff is cutting edge. It'll be great.
Sometimes it's the simplest of ways to making
Absolutely.
the special effects better. I think about that with Jaws all the time, but I won't get into that one.
No, apparently they haven't learned the lesson. How many movies have they ruined by the studio jumping in and telling them they needed to, like the Thing prequel? We don't want you to do the traditional effects that everybody knows and loves. We want you to do CG so it can be faster.
Mark, one of these days I'm gonna break the legs of that high horse you're on.
No, you're not. You're too short. You'd have to kneecap me.
I will kneecap you, and I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm trying to hurt the horse you're on. World of difference there.
So
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I'm going to do Josh's thing. Josh, if you had to rate it, what would it be?
Oh, this is a 4 out of 5.
Mark?
Oh, it's fun. I'm kind of with Josh on that. 4 out of 5.
Smash.
See, I'm sitting at a 3 out of 5, but that's only, again, it's only because the same, it is really the copy and paste, or I guess it's the original, but Scream Team on Disney Channel.
Oh my god.
You broke
Oh
up.
my
Scream
god.
Team,
It gives me
man.
the
Scream
same.
Team.
I know it was gonna be like, you were gonna be like, no way. But for me, it was the same kind of, because as I was in second grade when that movie came in, and I had like everyone was dying in my life. So Scream Team for me was probably like the spiritual beings and like heaven versus hell, and so it is the same storyline. It is almost the exact same storyline now looking at them in retrospect. And for me it was like, okay, this is also, I am not a Michael J. Fox fan, like, at all, even in the
How is
slightest.
that? How is that possible? I thought everybody was a fan.
So my brother loved, he still loves Back to the Future. And because he has sensory processing disorder, he kind of latched onto those movies. So it was on repeat in our house all the time. So when you're watching Michael J. Fox like 3 or 4 times a day from until you move out of your family home, that's a lot of Michael J. Fox. So now, don't get me wrong. This is probably the best movie I've seen him in. But I don't know necessarily if it's because he is portraying the character, or if the character is just written that dynamic and that well. So I mean, 3 out of 5 for me, but this is also coming from the person that Jaws is a 5 out of 5 for me. So a little bit of a different perspective there.
Yeah, Jaws is a good movie though. So I mean, I could see that, and I'm with them with 4 out of 5. So
Michael, this is probably the first time I've seen a Michael J. Fox outside of Back to the Future as an adult. And like I know a lot of people like grew up with him and like, you know, Teen Wolf and Back to the Future. He will always be Stuart Little for me.
Mhm. That was my kid.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Yeah. Wow. I didn't think about that.
But yeah, like this is a movie that kind of goes against the character that he's normally playing, because I think this might be the only horror movie he's ever done, which is really fascinating to me that he would do something like with this is a horror film that like is a lot of fun and it's really weird, but it also has like a lot of substance to it, and it's not all the time that you come across a major studio release that has a lot of the themes and hits a lot of the notes that the Frighteners hits.
And going on what Smash said earlier about if the character was written for him or if he was portraying the character, going back and watching it now, because at the time we didn't know this about the Parkinson's and everything. If you watch some of those scenes, you're wondering, okay, did they write this in, or was this like something with the Parkinson's? Like he was sitting on the table like this at the sheriff scene, and he started shaking.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing of Parkinson's.
Yeah.
There's
I
a
was
couple of
wondering if
scenes
that
in
was-
there that are that way, and you're wondering, did
I-
they leave it in because it fit the character, but it just so happened to be part of his side from the Parkinson's.
Yeah, I was wondering if that was they left that in where the Parkinson's started coming through, or if it was just how the scene was done.
I also didn't realize that he had Parkinson's while filming this, because it's like I feel like my earliest like recollection of like him announcing it is like somewhere in the early 2000s, because he kind of got away from doing a lot more of these like kind of like leading guy roles, and like started doing more like he did a lot with the Stuart Little franchise, you know, a lot of like voice acting, because he did this, and then he did Stuart Little, then he also did Atlantis, I think was like 2001. So you kind of started seeing him step back a little bit, but he was like still like active in acting. He just kind of switched over to voice acting, it seems like.
When voice acting, you can't, you know, it wasn't until later that I think the Parkinson's really started affecting his like voice acting as well, but it was much later. You can just pick up on it in like just certain ways he says things and certain ways he's pausing in between that don't necessarily fit with his dialogues in some of the older movies as well.
So I was double checking myself. He was diagnosed in 91 when he was at the age of 29. He didn't release it out to the public until 98. The reason why you probably think in 2000 is because that's when he established his Michael J. Fox Foundation for Parkinson's.
Probably.
I
Well,
I double checked it just to make sure I was right on the time frame. So this movie hit right in the middle of he knows, but the world doesn't.
there's been a handful of actors that have done that. Selma Blair is one. She's got, is it muscular dystrophy or something like that? That started kicking up real bad over the last few years, which is why she quit acting for the most part. Christina Applegate's got something she's dealing with similar. You had Freddie Mercury, who kept AIDS secret for years, for maybe decades. It was for at least a decade.
I don't think it was a decade, because I think he got diagnosed in like shortly after their Live Aid, and I think he died in like 91.
But
so
you got to remember, you brought this up earlier about social media. At that time and this time, it was easier not for everybody to know, because you don't. I mean, you got the paparazzi and everything still, but not like you do now. Not like you got the live stream and everything else, where now it's so hard for the celebrities and everything to hide what they have or what's going on versus that time frame.
You can still hide it though. I think like my generation, the big one that hit us at least, Selena Gomez with lupus. Yeah. She kept it a secret for a good 4 or 5 years. She was on like her 3rd or 4th album by the time she had lupus. And then it came out that her friend gave her a kidney transplant, and they're like, oh, why does she need a kidney transplant? And then I don't think it was until like a year or two later that she was really like, hey, I have lupus. And then she started doing her cooking show and how she cooks with still having lupus. And then Only Murderers in the Building came out.
Mhm.
And that was the first time we had, like, at least me, I had seen her on screen since like 2009, 2007.
Yeah.
Because she was one of those actresses that she's like a year older than I am. So, following her that closely, but I grew up in the age of social media. So the fact that she kept it a secret so long and you didn't actually see a change in her appearance until Only Murderers in the Building, that's kind of a feat, having all these paparazzi, having all this social media, but still being able to hide it.
Yeah, she also, I read recently, is she just did a movie that got like a 7 to 9 minute standing ovation at Cannes. So very excited. I don't remember the name of it, but a lot of people that saw it praised her performance in that. So I'm like, I'm ready for the Gomez Renaissance. Bring it on. But I think the common thread between a lot of, whether you're talking about Michael J. Fox's, Freddie Mercury, Selena Gomez, I think that's innately within us, right? Because like, we don't want to show a sign of weakness. If you have a person that is dealing with something like depression or anxiety, you find a way to mask it. You find a way to not be vulnerable or not show yourself to kind of be that. So that's why you have that's why I love doing conventions, is because you meet a lot of people that are like, yeah, I got into cosplaying because bullying. I got into anime because I had a bad home life and one of the character journeys resonated with my own, or that's why we have Superman. A lot of people, it kind of gets overlooked, but you have 2 Jewish kids from the Bronx that constantly got bullied, and so they created a character that couldn't be bullied, and that's how Superman was born. And so I think it just, there's something in the human condition that we don't want to talk about vulnerability, but we're starting to step into this age of understanding why it's important to talk about mental health, and we need to kind of keep furthering that conversation.
Well, and Josh, from doing the live stream last year, at least that's why I started cosplaying, was I had severe postpartum depression after my daughter was born. And because I had 2 more children back to back to back, they're all 18 months apart. So they're what's considered high risk triplets. And for me, I was the person who only wanted one. And to this day, we should have had 5 children. So for me, postpartum depression hit really, really hard. And I grew up in a household where therapy was not welcome, showing emotion was not welcome. If you were depressed, it's really hard, because my parents grew up telling us if we showed emotion, like, hey, we're going to put you in what, it's horrible, but this was the mindset they had. Basically a mental hospital. They would threaten us with putting us in the Lulu farm. That's what they called it, for, showing emotion and having depression. And it was something that until my adulthood, I didn't understand. So when I had postpartum depression and I didn't want to take care of my kids, it was one of those like, okay, something's wrong with me. And then, like you said, you go to conventions, you meet people, you don't know what's going on. That's why I started cosplaying. And then I have really bad ulcerative colitis. And that's something that most of my cosplay friends didn't even know until after. And they're like, oh, this is why you make your costumes this way, because if you're having a flare up, like certain things don't fit right. You need to be able to get out of a costume really easily if you get really sick or overheated. And so it is one of those things that it's like, when I was watching this movie, I was just like, oh my gosh, I wish I had have had this as a child, because it would have helped me understand everything I was going through with all of my family members dying at the same time, everything I was trying to deal with in regular life. So watching it now as an adult, it's like full circle almost. It's like, wow, my mental health would have been so much better had I have had this as a tool. And I think that's also often overlooked, is how powerful movies can be in aiding mental health.
And to the point of the movie and what both of you all just said, and we say this constantly, you never know what somebody beside you, in front of you, whatever is going through. It could be your best friend and they could still be hiding something. They could still be not communicating, not telling you what's going on, in fear of being a burden to you, or a burden to their own family, or a burden to anybody. They don't want to do that. And it doesn't even have to be because of like a death or something. It can just be depression, that they feel like there's a burden and they don't want to either make your life worse, or they feel like they make your life worse. And it's hard to overcome that sometimes. Sometimes you have to hit that turning point for yourself, even though other people try to help you. You've got to see that you're not, or you'll never overcome it. Even with, I mean, you could get help, but sometimes it takes the inner self to do it, even with all the help in the world.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. I recently came across something on one of the. I follow a lot of mental health and like therapists on Instagram, and one of them had recently posted about like separating yourself from people that will always hold you back and people that'll never allow you to grow. And man, I think that's a conversation that we need to have a lot more of, because the thing about it is, like, people are going to be in your life for a season, and that's going to be okay. And then you're going to have people that are going to be with you forever, and they're going to go through literal hell with you. And I would be remiss if I did not say this, but I get a lot of shit this past year for programming Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 into our filmography. And it's despised. It's hated by most people of the franchise. It's fine. It's a Rob Zombie movie. Rob Zombie is a filmmaker you either love or you hate. There's not a gray area. But I got to explain, this year it's the 15th year anniversary, and I got to explain why I programmed it. And I programmed it because the movie hit Blu-ray a year after a friend of mine had committed suicide. And that anniversary felt like it was reopening an entire wound that I felt like I hadn't properly allowed to heal. And when you watch that movie, it's this character journey. It's this 3-character journey of processing trauma. And I've always resonated with that. It's part of the reason that it was the first movie tattoo I got, and I got it on my hand specifically so that I can have people, ask me about it and that I can share. But that movie has always had a special place in my heart because it really helped me cope with a lot of things that I hadn't processed over time. And movies should not be discounted as just mere entertainment, but they are vehicles that allow us to go through the healing journey.
Yeah, I mean, movies like I said, this one hit different. There are times to where they can be, comedic or whatever, and they're just a movie, and then you can turn around and go back, and it could be a vessel of, oh wow, I didn't know I was even looking at this or thinking this or feeling this, and the movie brings it. A movie can bring that out of you to make you realize that you're actually going through something, even though you don't even realize it.
I think I gave you shit about Halloween too. Still,
yes, you did. It's all right. It's like the foundation of our friendship. You like the first one, I love the second one. It's fine. I'm used to it by now too. So,
yeah.
But yeah, I think that's gonna do it for us on this episode of Abyss Gazing, chronicling the Frighteners. Is there anything else that anyone wanted to address before we do social media?
Well, I'll say this. I don't know if I've ever said it this way. Thank you, Josh, and thank you, Mark. I see the difference now from where I was when I started to where I am now.
You're welcome. Bill's in the mail.
So,
All right. That's going to do it for us on this episode of Abyss Gazing. You guys can catch Smash and Victims and Villains at Cosplay World June 15th and 16th at the Greater Richmond Convention Center here in Richmond. But Smash, thank you. Where can people find you online?
All the same: TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. It's all just Smash B Cosplay.
All right. Well, Billy, where can we find you online?
you can find me at Letterboxd at VABoy99.
Mark?
I've actually been updating my Instagram.
I'm so
We
proud of you.
noticed.
They grow up so fast.
Cheers.
Doing my miniature painting, working on a competition piece, which I'll find out how I do in like 2 weeks when it is. But yeah, titanium juggernaut painting on Instagram.
And much like Billy, you guys can also catch me over on Letterboxd. It is Captain Nostalgia. And you guys can follow Abyss Gazing wherever you guys get your podcasts from. And also follow our parent company, Victims and Villains. We are on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Patreon, and wherever you guys get your podcasts from. We are leaving you guys this week with Safe Sex. The song is called Toxic Rocket. If you guys like what you hear, check them out alongside with Lila Moons, who you heard earlier in our show, Betty Gray, Saint of Pine Hills, and Ooga Booga. Until next time, remember, the longer you gaze into the abyss, the more the abyss gazes back into you.
What's your story, Rosalind? How come you keep going over? I don't care what he says. I see that bruise on your shoulder. And I'm not buying that grin. What kind of hell are you living in? Let him die for his sins. 'Cause he's a toxic rocket, blowing up your only spaceship. Yeah, he's a stop sign, red light. Yeah, he's a bad guy in disguise. Oh yes, I'm having fun. I'll drive my car around that corner. It feels like a hit and run.